All right, today we're going on a journey deep inside the human brain. We're going to reframe how we think about addiction, moving past all the common myths to see what the science actually tells us. And we're going to start with the biggest question of them all.
So let's get right to it. This is the central question, isn't it? Is addiction a moral failing, a simple lack of willpower, or is it something else entirely, a disease that literally hijacks the brain? This is the fundamental conflict we're going to untangle today.
Well, modern science is actually pretty clear on this. Addiction is now understood as a complex disease. You can see the definition here, a pathological, meaning unhealthy, pursuit of pleasure or relief. See, what happens is that drugs of abuse tap into and totally overwhelm our brain's natural reward system. You know, the one that releases dopamine to make us repeat things essential for survival, like eating. These substances create a powerful shortcut to pleasure that the brain starts to crave above everything else. The key word here really is disease. This isn't about a person's character, it's about their brain chemistry.
Okay, but here's where it gets tricky, right? While it's a disease, every single addiction starts with a voluntary act, a choice. The choice to take a drug or engage in a behavior for the very first time. This is that crucial point where our understanding so often breaks down. So let's get really clear on how that one first step can lead to a full-blown disorder.
So how does that first choice spiral into a clinical disorder? Let's actually map out the path from just casual use all the way to compulsion. Think of it as a journey with some really clear signposts along the way, and understanding them is absolutely key.
So how do clinicians even diagnose this? Well, they use a guide called the DSM-5, which is kind of the standard manual for mental disorders, and it lays out all these criteria that we can group into 4 major signposts. First up, you've got impaired control. This is when a person uses more than they wanted to, or they try to stop but just can't. Second, social problems, which is when drug use starts messing with their relationships and responsibilities. Third is risky use, like using in dangerous situations. And finally, you have the physiologic effects. This means developing a tolerance, needing more and more to get the same effect, and of course experiencing withdrawal when you stop.
So, when you see those signposts, what you're really looking at is what's officially called a substance use disorder, or SUD for short. It's basically a cluster of symptoms that show continued use is causing real impairment across a person's life, cognitively, physically, and socially. And the more of those criteria a person meets, the more severe the disorder is considered.
Okay, let's pull back a bit and look at the bigger picture, the whole landscape of psychoactive drugs. Because not all substances are created equal, not in their effects or in their potential to cause addiction. And just to get a sense of the scale here, just look at this number. In 2022, nearly 26%, that's more than a quarter, of all young adults in the U.S. had used cannabis in the last month. It is by far the most widely used federally illicit drug, which just goes to show you how common substance use really is.
Now this is where things get really interesting. This ranking of addictive potential, it might surprise you. Heroin is right there at the top, very high, which you'd probably expect. But look what's right behind it. Nicotine, a substance millions of people use every single day. And way down at the bottom, hallucinogens like LSD actually have a very low potential for creating a substance use disorder. Understanding this spectrum is so crucial for understanding risk.
And when we talk about high-risk substances, we absolutely have to talk about the opioid crisis. This quote, wow, it puts the human cost in such stark terms. 130 people, every single day. That's just a staggering loss of life, and it's being driven by some of the most addictive substances we've ever known.
And this chart does an amazing job of showing us how that crisis evolved. You can see these 3 very distinct waves. Wave 1, there in red, was fueled by prescription opioids. Then, when those became harder to get, Wave 2 began around 2010 with a rise in heroin use. And Wave 3, that purple line skyrocketing upwards since 2013, that is driven by incredibly potent synthetic opioids like fentanyl.
So let's just quickly break down the major drug categories we see here. First, you have opioids, like heroin and morphine, powerful painkillers. Then there are central nervous system, or CNS, depressants. Think things like Xanax, that slow down brain activity. And finally, you have CNS stimulants, like cocaine and meth, that do the exact opposite, ramping up alertness and energy. And while their effects are all different, they all fundamentally change how the brain works. Okay, so this begs a really big question, right? If so many people use substances, why don't only some of them develop a disorder? The answer isn't just in the drug itself. It's found at this crossroads between an individual's risk and their resilience.
The answer really lies in this complex kind of balancing act. On one side, you have these risk factors that make someone more vulnerable, things like childhood trauma, their genetics, even poverty. But on the other side, you have protective factors that build resilience, things like strong self-control or a supportive family. So in the end, addiction isn't just about the drug. It's about this constant interplay between the substance and a person's entire life.
So here is the most crucial point in this whole story. While addiction is a devastating disease, it is also treatable. And that brings us to our final section, the way forward.
You see, effective modern treatment has to be comprehensive. It's not just about getting someone to stop using a substance. It's about treating the whole person. This can include medication-assisted treatments, counseling to deal with underlying issues like depression or anxiety, and of course, the incredibly vital role of peer support systems like AA and Narcotics Anonymous.
And alongside treatment, there's this really important movement called harm reduction. The goal here isn't always immediate abstinence. It's about minimizing the negative consequences of drug use. This includes really practical, life-saving strategies, like providing clean needles to prevent disease, making the overdose reversal drug naloxone widely available, and even testing street drugs to prevent accidental fentanyl poisoning. It's a pragmatic and deeply compassionate approach.
So we've seen that addiction is a disease of the brain, not a moral failure. We've seen the factors that can lead to it and the paths that can lead toward recovery. So we're going to end with this question. If understanding is truly the first step, what's the next one for us as a community to take?